And so when you have, John Diefenbaker, when you have the freedom to walk away and not be controlled, you're going to have the freedom to make the right decisions for you, your family, and your communities. There's an exercise in absurdity. It was the theater of the absurd. I didn't do anything for 6.5 years, 2 terms, I'm there. And you learn very quickly that the control process are the complete opposite of what you thought. So the reality was kind of the staff around 90% of everything. At one point, I was giving a speech, Trent, and I put the Speaker of the House to sleep.
Yeah.
And it was by design, and he was sleeping. There's only 4 or 5 people in there. And I started talking about the NDP's drive for metric time. It's just nonsense. And,
metric time.
Yeah, metric time, instead of having, 60 divided by 6, it should be in 10. There was full-on nonsense, and the Speaker's sleeping.
From the peak of Saddle Butte to the depths of the Laporte Slough, this is the Trent Klarenbach podcast, brought to you by the Klarenbach Grain Report and Klarenbach Special Crops Report. Today, it's going to be a great conversation. A longtime friend of mine. He's probably known him as long as I've been alive. There's pictures of us in our bassinets back in 1970, I guess it'd be 72, wasn't it? Jason Dearborn from Laporte / Eatonia, Saskatchewan. And he's got a long pedigree, highly educated individual. He's been to the University of Toronto, University of Trinity College with a bachelor's degree in history. He also got a master's of divinity. He's been to the University of Regina, got a master's of MBA, master's of business administration and management. And he's been to Oxford with a postgraduate diploma in global business, international business. He has been a MLA in Saskatchewan, served a term there, the Legislative Assembly of Saskatchewan. He's got some interesting stories about that. He's the president of Brecknock Farm, and he started and founded Dominion Blockchain, and which is now released or about to release a grain token, the GrainX token. Interesting individual. He's had a number of startups. It's been quite a journey for Jason in his life. It's been fun to follow. And I think here we are. Great to have you here today, Jason.
Thanks, Trent. Nice to be here. Obviously, Trent and I were defenseman buddies.
That's right.
In minor hockey, I guess up to Pee Wee. So every other year. So I think I played on the left, you played on the right, but we were both left-handed.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
that's right.
Good memory. Memory.
So
Jason, he could skate and I couldn't, so he was the one carrying the puck, and I was the one staying back. He was the Markel, and I was the Brad McCrimmon, I guess.
And then our farms are just up the road from one another, so we had the same motorcycle as a kid.
Yes.
XR100, but you could drive yours quickly, and I could not.
I'm not sure. Yeah, maybe you're older, but I had an interesting, I was telling my wife today about this. I have memories of playing hockey, skating on your indoor swimming pool.
Yeah.
One winter, which was, and Michelle has asked me, how did this even happen? How does this even work?
Well, Bill used to drain the pool down and then blow out the lines because it's not an insulated building. And then the hired men would come in and drop the boards around. It's not very big, right? Like it's, 60 by 40? So it's not huge. But for little kids, it's great,
That's
right?
Great, yeah.
And we had to use a rubber puck so that we didn't put it through. There's a lot of windows in that building, and we never broke one. So that pool was absolutely wonderful growing up. All our neighbors had motorcycles as kids.
Yes.
So there's the Prices, yourselves, the Ginnegers. Brent Henry.
Yeah.
The legend himself. And everybody, all the kids would come over and go swimming in the afternoons, typically. We had really had a pretty pristine childhood when you think about the prosperity of the Eatonia area in the late 70s, early 80s was really quite something. And when you start to look at some of the agricultural innovations that came out of our area, canary seed, Arnold Nunwaller, I think your family was involved with that. The first lentil crop supposedly grown in Saskatchewan, according to the Saskatchewan Science Center, was 1972, Eatonia area. I don't know who did it.
I think it was Ray and Lee Cooper.
Right, but it is a fairly, Tyson would have been another one on the motorcycle there.
Yeah.
And the lentil crop this year is fantastic. We had a really odd year coming out of 5 years of drought, and now it started raining at the end of June, hasn't stopped. It's a little too late for the early crops and stuff south, but there's our neighbors, I think Doug Schmunk's looking at 50 bushels the acre on this stuff just south of us. Is beautiful crops.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, we didn't experience those yields. And,
No, and Trent and I were both operating in the late 90s, early 2000s. And there were some production challenges. What was that year? 2002? 2001 and 2002?
2004 was in there too.
Yeah. It was dry. The prices were down. The wheat board had not been slain. So we were at 60% of, in the last production year that I was operating, I didn't have a single board crop. I just grew canary seed and red lentils. And, I follow the Klarenbach report and the brilliance of technical trading. I was not that sophisticated. My trading was called Tuesdays and Thursdays.
That wasn't brilliant, though.
Super B came Tuesdays and Thursdays and filled up, and I got a spot loss or cost averaging, and that was as advanced as my marketing ever got.
Well, it's an extremely effective way to market.
Well, it meant cash in the bank.
Yeah.
Every week, and so the challenges with cash flow in ag, I think this is a very, very asset rich and cash flow difficult business to manage. And we look at the farms now. We had a huge number of granaries growing up. My grandfather and his two sons were very, very large operators, late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
Up to a township, not all owned, but farmed, and very different, 50-50, diskers, hired men doing summer follow all day. And now all those granaries are gone. They only last 40, 50, 40 years. But you go around the country and you see these huge granaries.
Right.
And the infrastructure, the farms, and just the husbandry, they're all good farmers now, with the exception of the odd organic, crop insurance farmer. The husbandry's great, and it's really something to see. Also, the way so many of our neighbors, they're really, really great operators when you look at it. I've run a farm as well at Foam Lake for 2 years for a Chinese investment group. We had 10,000 seeded acres. So it's directly east, basically, of where we are, maybe a little bit farther north, but different worlds, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Trees and beaver dams, and there was more rocks on 1/4 section that we were tasked with farming than in the RM of Chesterfield, like it was on a different planet.
Yeah.
But
I was telling somebody I was up in northern Alberta here a month ago, and I made a joke that I was 22 years old before I saw a tree. And I had a bit of a hyperbole, but,
Well, every tree where we are were planted by our families.
in farmyards,
Yeah, there aren't any. And, it was my great-great-grandmother was a pioneer, and the mother's side of the family, they were the first people. Aside, there's some ranchers were there before us, but the first farmer was our farm, 1906. And I think the real success of the farm, south of your guys is where the water run starts to come all the way down. And we have a well with really beautiful drinking water that was hand dug, and it's 42 feet deep.
Wow.
And so, when you get south of our place, like Coopers are down 300 and some feet. My great-grandparents on the other side, they were down 300 and some feet. It took into the 30s to get those well drillers down there. So before that, every day down to the river with a cart, right, to get water. So
So how did your family know to, like our place too is over like 300 feet. I think water's at 280 feet when the well was drilled. So
my great grandpa Pinder, they came over from Britain in 1904, and the other side of the family ended up being were related to the group that did Pinder Drugs that eventually became Shoppers Drug Mart.
Yeah.
That'd be, so they were distant shirttail from Shropshire in England, but they came over in 1904 and they stopped at Edgeley, which is outside of Fort Capel. And then they kept coming west, and I think there was just surveyor mounts, so I think he was just able to read the topography and some of its, providence. There's nothing really else, because really you go south of us, I don't think there was a well at the Martin farm, which is where that would end. There's nobody there anymore, and you're coming out into those hills by the time you're at Wilson's, and then so everything south of us, the underground streams are taking away to the river in those artesian wells. So that's why it won't pool. So we just hit that real sweet spot.
So is there something that, like, I look at that, you drive down the gravel road there and it just looks flat. So there must have been, there's obviously
about 2 years ago with these forest fires, we were coming back from over by Eston, and there was all this smoke in the air, and you could, it banged out our topography perfectly in a way that, like, when you drive down our road, it would look like it's perfectly flat.
Yeah.
It's not. We have a hog's back that are ends right at our farm, a little tiny lump, like if you don't know it's there, you wouldn't know. And every year we had one rock that we'd have to pick that will come out of it.
Yeah.
Right? And it ends right at the house, and it runs up towards Royal Canadian School. Not quite at that. It's more of a westerly run. So maybe that surface piece had a little to do with it. I don't know.
I've heard early oil drillers, they could look at the topography and come up with some probabilities for a successful well.
I think so. We actually, the ranch, the 96 ranch, is just up for sale now again. Scott Palmer, who ended up buying it. It was the largest organic cattle ranch in Canada, and their grandfather was the first oil man in Canada, came up from Texas, Western Canada.
Really?
1921. Yeah, and that's part of our local now. They're outside of Pincher Creek, and but I went to school in Toronto with the nephew, Judd Palmer, amazing individual, cut a couple albums, won a couple of Governor General's awards for a couple little books that he's written. He's a puppeteer.
Really?
He was in. He did the puppets in Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the Disney music movie with the dogs and stuff. Yeah, he's fairly very, very entertaining fellow, massively talented, and it's his dad lived on their ranch at Pincher Creek, and then they bought the one south of us. So
yeah. Well, that was the difference. I noticed the difference between you going away to school in Toronto, for example. I went to U of S. And it was a glorious time, no regrets whatsoever. But I was talking with a buddy here on Saturday. We used to go down and sit at the bottom of the escalators in Place Riel. They call it Place Riel now because it was called Place Riel.
Yeah.
Anyways, it was all full of Eatonia, Eston, Elrose, Kyle people at that time. Some leader people mingled in there. But it was, everybody, I think I was one of the few people who wasn't chewing Copenhagen at that time and spitting into the trash cans. But anyways, so I go to this university, my network expands 100 miles, right? You went to Toronto and all of a sudden...
Yeah, I think it really started when we went away to boarding school, and Bill, my dad, and my mom both went to boarding school. Bill didn't last, though. He only did 2 days, and then he was crying on the plane on the way home. He was just too homesick. But my brother and I went, and my boys went to St. Michael's University School in Victoria. And that was really the essence of the global game changer. Like, we had kids from 30-some countries at school.
Yeah.
And I'm doing business with them now.
Yes.
You know, like, so my man in Japan, Susumu Najima, who is the acting VP of Asia for our company right now, he came over in grade 10. His dad was the president of IBM Nippon Steel Japan. They have these really weird crossovers. Like, there's a special word in Japanese for it too. It's eluding me right now. But anyways, he came out to the farm for the 3 Christmases rather than go home. And so that started the nature of those relationships. Really, you know, 100% of the kids went to university there. And some of them were from really, really prominent families. And it just, the scope of the world just got a lot bigger. In grade 10, my roommate, one of them, his father was the vice president of Boeing sales, which in the 80s, that was the largest exporting company in the United States, right? There weren't all that many. And they, you know, they had a Rolls Royce at home and went all over the world and cut deals. And so when you get exposed to the fact that these are just people, they're no different than you and me. And you know, I think if you're in the ag community, you couldn't have done better than go to U of S, because you've met all of these people that absolutely know what they're talking about. And they're good operators, and they've been innovative, and they're wealthy. They've made a lot of money now.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And all those people sitting down chewing Copenhagen and Place Real have been, they've achieved, I would say, above average success.
Oh,
in their careers.
There's no doubt about it. And if you actually put a pin in our farm and you draw a circle of about 30 miles, you've got just a ridiculous number of people that had done well financially. And a lot of the females, like, you know, Kim Henry ended up as chief financial officer of Bennett Jones. This is the largest law firm in Western Canada that does, you know, and this is a neighbor that, you know, it really is ridiculous. I would say you're going to have as many millionaires at a pin and, you know, drop the 100 people that live closest around us, and it'll mirror Forest Hill, Toronto, or anywhere. And I think a lot of that has to do with all these kids growing up on the farm. They all knew how to work. They're all honest. Like, as a whole, it's very, very honest society. And we're really the first post-Christian group. You know, like, I studied systematic theology, but I don't go to church regularly on Sundays now because it's, you know, it's more than 50 miles one way, so it's just not happening anymore. And that started with our generation. Not everybody went to church every weekend, and it's just, but so you had this really unique cultural space. When we went to elementary school, we had amazing student-teacher ratio. Just ridiculous. Like, you know, this is one of the things that just floors me. There's public schools now that have, you know, 30 grade 9s or 35 grade 9s in a room. That's insanity. I mean, like, that teacher has to be some sort of superhero. You got all these confused teenagers raging with hormones and
different learning capabilities or ability, or how they learn is differentiated amongst them all.
And so for us, you know, like my class, you know, the class in 1990 in Eatonia, there were 12 kids in it. Name them all. Went to school with them from kindergarten. And in our year, Brent Henry, myself, and Melissa Becker, all our parents were in the same high school class. Like,
that's right.
So you had this intergenerational thing. It was
pretty cool. I think it's really cool.
Well, and it's something that's I write, Trent, is something that I'm writing about, because this is a lament of a society switching where I would have known all my friends' grandparents. Chris Becker, who was, you know, my best friend in elementary school, 3 out of 12 of the kids were his cousins, right?
That's true enough, yeah.
So, you know, you had these very unique, it was just a very unique upbringing. I have written about this. I've written a couple books. They're not published yet. And I don't know if they'll be the quality to be published. But one of the ones from Eatonia in the early 1980s, the community got together to have their own dish. Do you remember this?
I remember that. Yeah.
And in retrospect, just the genius of this is about 1981, and they went out and they took $1,000 from a whole bunch of people. And the fact that back then, and you got your money back 3 years later, and they were just going to sit, and the interest, and they built 2 towers to broadcast, and they bought 2 dishes out at Urban Becker's farm, just north of Eatonia.
Yeah.
And the chairman of that group was the Royal Bank manager.
Okay.
I think his name was Mo.
Okay.
And nobody batted an eye. And Eatonia never had a police officer. Okay. In retrospect, all of this violates every Canadian regulatory CRTC. Nobody give a damn, right? This is so awesome. Hey, we can get HBO. Like, I can't afford this myself. And our family had a dish about the year that happened. We were very fortunate in that front. But the entire, it went all the way over to Ontario. We set up our own broadcast. And, you know, this is prairie pragmatism at its best, because there was a problem. The community came together to solve the problem. They didn't ask for anybody's help. They didn't they just get the hell out of our way and do this.
Yeah, we'll just figure this out.
And, you know, that's ironically, one of the files I had when I was the MLA, I was there for the 24th and 25th legislative sessions. So 2 terms.
Oh, 2 terms. Okay.
And I was elected when I was 30. We were in opposition with the Saskatchewan Party. I was at the founding convention of the Saskatchewan Party many, many years ago. And, you know, we didn't want the New Democrats, or we wanted, I think, really a socially conservative but libertarian bent to how we'd like to run our lives. And one of the great things that was done by the Blakeney government was they put in 3 paired fiber optic cables into all of our farmyards. I don't know if you know this, but where you have your telephones.
Yeah.
So you could actually house 6 telephones on every one of your.
Okay. Yeah.
And
I just took that for granted.
yeah, and so what you used to get when people used landlines was you get your first phone for $25. You could get a second one for $50, right? But there were 4 more phone lines buried in your farm, and the next one after that was like $6,000. Why? Because CRTC had made a ruling that they had to amortize out the cost of putting this in. It's just nonsense. This was one of the files. I didn't get it resolved, but a neighbor of ours, we won't, you know, all the Eatonia people will know because they own a large trucking company, right? And while it was still out at the farm, they needed another phone line, and they got hit with this, right? They've got the infrastructure's there. All you got to do is turn it on. And they had this like ridiculous bill, and I said, well, just go incorporate a company, right? And, you know, instead of the $5,500 or whatever they're going to charge you for a phone line, do the $400 for the incorporation and get the $25 phone line, and then just let it lapse, right, and keep paying the bill. But these are, you know, elements of our young society having moved from a pioneer society to, you know, one that's now dealing in artificial intelligence. We've seen this massive, massive shift, and the role of the state within this is, you know, really, really something that I think for our neighbors and ourselves, because I know how everybody votes, right, is we can build a really, really great society, but we don't have to have that overreach.
Yeah, right. Let's take a break here.
Yep.
All right, yeah, so everybody, we know how everybody votes. A lot of our communities thinks the same way, believes the same belief system, and it's was a great time to grow up. Just when we took a quick break there, I'm reminded of a story of the satellite dish, and because there was no one looking after it, and like there's no police officer or anything in town, right? There was a few gentlemen in town, the story is, and I remember this, they'd go out at night after 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock at night, or maybe it was midnight, and they'd switch the channel over to the to the channel those kids weren't supposed to be watching. So that's the way it was back then. But yeah, so you were in the legislature for a couple years, a couple terms, I guess.
Yeah, 2 terms, but only about just under 7 years, 6.5 years.
Yeah.
And I was in opposition. I was the technology critic predominantly. It's an eye-opening experience. So, you know, I come from a political family. Best man at my wedding, it was the Honorable Michael Chong, right? He was my best friend at U of T. And Mike played rugby with me for the Blues at University of Toronto. And Mike is the foreign affairs critic now for the Conservative Party. And my dad, in his retirement, his best friend was a Conservative member of Parliament as well, LeVar Payne. But Robert Pinder, my grandfather, was the campaign manager for the Liberal candidate. I've forgotten, this is way back in the 50s, right? And Russ Dearborn, my grandfather, nominated, he was a New Democrat. He nominated Alec Taylor from the floor, which is, I guess, a big deal back in those days, right? The way that New Democrats used to run their parties. And so we had to, like, you know, the history of the MLAs in Kindersley is Alec Taylor was the only New Democrat ever elected. Okay. He was the first minister of social services. He was actually the United Church minister that held me when I was baptized
Really?
By the Roman Catholic priest, and that's why I'm an Anglican, someplace in the middle. And you know, Neil McMillan was a liberal, but you know, from that Thatcher, we're a right of center place, and historically as well, you know, the dirt at Eatonia and Eston, we have fairly high quality, and in the 1950s, that Laporte rail line was the highest producing grain line in the entire country. And we always grow number 1 as well, you know, number 1 red wheat, usually malting barley, and number 1 durum, and just the climatic conditions. So it was a unique and really great place to be raised. Every one of the families, all the kids could afford to play hockey. Like it wasn't just topographically flat, it was completely, I think one of the very unique things about Saskatchewan was there was no social hierarchy in Eatonia whatsoever.
Right.
Nobody would bat an eye if the doctor's kid was best friends with the road grade operators, right? There's no, and it's even ironic. Like I think of, you know, he works for Thaker now, but Richie Adams, when he was the foreman of the RM, was one of the most respected guys in the town.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and you could ask anybody, and you know, this wasn't. So it was a real unique way that I think all of us that came out of that generation ended up approaching other people in the way that we. And this is unique to prairie small towns. Like, well, I've been doing international business for over 20 years now. And I think Saskatchewan has a per capita trade higher than any place in the world. Like, you know, we export everything, we trade everything. And when we do our international business, we tend to interface in a similar manner that we would with our neighbors. It's upfront, it's honest, and straightforward. And it has significant advantages in doing commerce that way.
We notice, we've been in the city for 2 years now, a year and a half, and we notice the trades in the city behave differently than the trades back home.
Yep.
Because they're not going to see us again, likely.
Absolutely.
And the trades at home, and business people, right? You're going to run into them at the rink, the ball diamond, and the beer parlor. Maybe your kids end up dating each other, right?
Yeah.
So, I got a newfound respect for how business is conducted in those small communities.
And it's the thing, this is the wonderful thing about agriculture, is that you can't move your farm. So I've been on farms on 5 continents. I've been on farms in Russia, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, France. All farmers have to be honest because you can't move your farm. And when I know who your parents are, your grandparents, everybody else, you know exactly everybody's reputation.
Yeah.
And none of our reputations are perfect, right? Like, because we have different families, right?
Yeah.
Some people are nosy, some people are bossy, some people are noisy.
Well,
they even get the nickname noisy, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's amazing.
Yeah, and we're human, right? So,
Absolutely.
You know, so we're fallible creatures in all regard, but
So this is it's a massive advantage to us, and you know, where we are right now, Canada, and it's the challenges our country faces. We're going through this profound shift. It's very, very different than. It's a very different place than where we grew up, and I don't think anybody would argue against that. And because I've lived in British Columbia, I've lived in Toronto. Our family on the Dearborn side, and you know, they're upper Canada loyalists, United Empire loyalists that came up after the Revolutionary War. So we've been in Ontario a long time. We still have family there that we're in touch with. And Toronto now, to me, is almost an unrecognizable city than 25 or 30 years ago when I was at school there. We've had offices there, and now south of Bloor Street, really, the city doesn't go to sleep. Like, for me, the noise is unbelievable. It's 24 hours. Like, it's constant. And, you know, it's now the 3rd biggest urban area in North America after New York and LA. Like,
oh, really?
GTA is because it just, for us, if you don't know, it doesn't stop, right? You land there, you can drive an hour north on Yonge Street and still be in the city. Now, it's different municipalities, but for us that doesn't know, or you can go all the way to Hamilton, and you know, going east, you're still in cities and in Oshawa and Whitby, and it's all just this one great chunk. And it's a very, very different place, I think, than it was 25, 30 years ago. And the values have really changed, and I think it's really frustrating to us in the West more often than not. You know, right now we've got these canola tariffs that are sitting on as a response to 100% electric vehicle tariffs, and you know, I'm not particularly against or for electric cars, but it's just, you know, innate challenges within the country now that are going to be exacerbated going forward.
Well, when I was an EO, this is 10 or 12 years ago now, we had a speaker come in. He was from one of the polling companies in Canada here, and the topic of the presentation was Canada is not what you think it is. So he came out of down east Toronto to Saskatoon, where our EO membership, and we were not discriminating on skin color, but it was 30 white dudes and 3 or 4 white ladies. And he talked about how Canada's not what you think. You think it's a bunch of white guys, right? It's not. He said 40%, at that time, 40% of Toronto was a recent immigrant, which is it's just an incredible number. So
it is. And when I was at school at Trinity College, we were the first generation that these, you know, born Canadians were attending school at the highest level here. So these guys were all our friends. I'm pro-immigration, but what's happened, especially since COVID and whatnot, is our immigrant community has really, really been betrayed because they come here expecting opportunity, et cetera, et cetera. And I think a lot of this has been driven by the falsehood of a few housing markets in Vancouver, in Toronto, and you know, the immigrants come, they rent the apartments are then, the people that were in them, they buy their first condos, the condo owners, they're having kids, they buy a house or a detached, And it just never stops. But the real value behind that, you really have to question that. And then to drive that into a political voting cycle at the expense of our natural resources, like places like Canada has just this huge advantage, right? We're the second biggest nation on earth. We have petroleum, we have everything.
Yeah.
And to push this for some, globally integrated finance, service-based economy, I think it's been a real problem that's really now in the West. We're seeing these fissures, right? Where if you talk to, farmers, you can tell exactly where they're sitting.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not going to change, I expect. And, both of us, we love Canada, but there's real serious issues that we're going to be facing going forward. And, the work that we're doing now, I work with technology and blockchains and real world assets. And, these are pieces that are going to be fitting into exactly some of these challenges that are coming forth. I'm particularly worried right now with, I work with artificial intelligence. Actually, Trent, you introduced me to ChatGPT in 2022, and I'm on it daily. The productivity for myself, I would say I'm up about 25% every quarter. It's absolutely, and it's the tools that are coming into existence now. We're using AI agents in the business. You can speak to them.
Yeah.
And just the capacities that are going to come with this, there is going to be a real likelihood of a displacement of a lot of jobs coming from this. And the persons that are going to be removed from those jobs, they're going to split 50-50. Some will move into a new type of economy, right? A gig economy working. And others are going to move to dependencies. And that dependency is going to be driven by on the state, by the state.
Well, I introduced that idea to some friends of mine back home. I think it's before COVID. I could just see this coming, that in my opinion at that time, I think I still hold that view, is UBI is going to be necessary for any government that wants to remain in power.
It's, we've certainly got some challenges ahead of us. And I'm really dismayed that, at the provincial level, which is supposed to be the protectors of property, that there's no discussions around this, right? We have all these natural resources. We're going to, and this is, I think, the single biggest threat to the Saskatchewan and the Canadian farmer is the hard assets which we and our families are in possession of are juxtapositioned to the digital assets that are moving forward into real world assets, but also things like your user base, your email list. That's something that the CRA or the government of Canada and or Saskatchewan can't come after. Farmland, on the other hand, is the opposite of that. You know exactly where it is. And
well, you don't pay your taxes for a few years, and you'll find out
if
you own it or not, or if you control it, right?
Yeah, and this is one of the policy pieces that I do. Like I say, I work with AI every day. I work with it in my business. I also write theology with it, and I write policy. Because as you learn to use it, it's most effective when you're not doing just one thing, right? You want to, I should be taking music lessons with it because I'll learn a lot, and it's the cross-pollinations are where the real magic with some of it comes out. And I've learned that, in interfacing with the artificial intelligence, well, the biggest deniers of it are, number one, computer programmers, number two, lawyers, accountants, but they're not even awake enough. Those are professions that are no longer going to be necessary in the scope that they have been historically, just because for your legal documentation, for example, most of your contract drafting, there's ChatGPT for law. It costs $20, not $20,000. Like, I've got to draft a prospectus done. That's a $100,000 document. Now, is it perfect? No. I mean, we're going to go through the lawyers, yes, but is like 95% of the work done?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing.
See, that's the interesting thing I find. When we first started coming out with these automations and whatnot, people talked about, the cashiers at the McDonald's would be losing their jobs, right? With AI now, it's highly paid professionals that have their jobs. Their roles gonna change. Hopefully, they all adopt it, the technology. But the technology is replacing a lot of those tasks at law, medical, financial.
I think university is probably one of the most interesting ones because post-secondary education, if anybody knows their history, when Sputnik goes up, the West responds by throwing money at universities. I don't know if you knew that.
I didn't know.
Education prior to Sputnik was still the classics. You're reading the Bible, Latin, Greek, stuff like this. This satellite goes into the air in the 1950s, and they're terrified that the Soviets are ahead. So the Americans, the British, the Western world, post-secondary education explodes for our parents' generation.
In the STEM?
Well, and they're looking at all the sciences so that we're not going to lose the space race or anything else. And all of that has kind of run its course. When COVID hit, both of my sons were, one was at Queen's, one's at University of Calgary, and they didn't have to, there's no more classes, right? Everything's online. Well, it turns out that even though COVID's long gone, everything's still online. Everything's still online. Yeah. So really, you have to ask yourself, what is the nature of the experience that you're getting? And on top of that, because I write with AI, it's like having your own Oxford tutor, but better for $20 a month. So I think that our post-secondary institutions in the province are probably going to see a fairly major realignment. Not so much the trade schools. I think they're going to get a big bump.
Oh, I think so too.
Because these are things, I don't see robots fixing the plumbing anytime soon.
No.
Right? I do see robots in the field.
Oh,
absolutely.
Yeah,
and this is the second thing that is so, we were up at a really progressive farm north of Unity, south of Cut Knife, and they're doing a drone demo. And it's using AI to change out its own batteries. And this thing,
change out its own batteries?
Yeah.
Really? You don't even need to be there?
Well, no, you're there, right? But these things were $29,000, and it's the size of like a little hatchback Fiat. We're not talking; these aren't like little toys. And the high clearance sprayer sitting there—that's $1 million. So these things are going to come into effect very, very quickly. And John Deere's lot and Case, they both have their robotic. And as well as I do, we haven't been driving the tractors for 25 years. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't drive it in a straight line, so that was helpful for me. But,
yeah. Well, I was too bored driving a straight line. I found it too tedious. I couldn't focus long enough.
So just like when you and I were farming, I tried lots of different crops. I had coriander, and I had canary seed, and I think I've grown 19 different types of crops, and with varying levels of success. But now, the idea that the farmer's not going to actually be needed, I don't think a lot of our producers have their heads around this. And the real loss is not going to be on the operation of your farm, it's going to be on the political power, and the lobby of the farm is going to absolutely be disintegrated. And this is what, in Saskatchewan, we should probably be most concerned with. We still are holding the balance of power here by our farmers, and we're the last place in Canada. Maybe Prince Edward Island, it's hard to say. I don't know their internal politics, very, very different than ours. But you can see that Quebec dairy lobby is on its last legs. It's going to die. The, you know, whatever, the farmers are now down, there's about 250, 300,000 in Canada for 40 million people. Like, we don't have,
Yeah.
and at the same time, we have a huge perception problem in Toronto where they will come after us to steal our property, right? Like, you know, we're still seen as old MacDonald with a, you know, straw hat, or maybe Letterkenny's the best example, right? A hockey playing, you know, pseudo redneck.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're the definition of white privilege, and they're going to come after it. And I really worry. It's one of the things on the land titling piece I'd like to see. I'd like to see the option provincially of ourselves being able to take our family farms and registering them through a bereavement process. They have this in Britain. We don't have it in North America.
Well, let's explain to the audience what that looks like, or what that bereavement process is.
Under the common law, we use something called the TARNS property registry system, and this is used throughout North America. But in Great Britain, they have a second one called bereavement, and it's for the gentry and the, you know, people with title. And the amazing thing is, since the Battle of Hastings in 1066, 500 families still own like 65% of Great Britain. They've been able to preserve it for almost 1,000 years. Through primogeniture, everything's left to the oldest son. That's one of the ways that... what's that?
Too bad that wasn't the thing in Saskatchewan,
eh? I think it was cultural.
We're both the oldest sons, I guess.
Yeah, well, I guess it was cultural. It was more on the one side for the Pinders. That was absolutely the case. Like, my grandfather Robert was the oldest son, and he wanted to be a solicitor. And he was the oldest son. He came home to a big farm at the time, 3.5 sections in the 30s was good size,
absolutely.
right? And but his younger brother and you know, became a pretty, like, really highly placed executive in Toronto. He was a vice president at Crane, and very briefly president of A&W Canada for a very short period of time. He was an engineer went to McGill. Anyways, but it was a very English thing, right? The oldest son, and it wasn't that it was void from the other, you know, cultures, but the American side, the Dearborns, my Grandpa Russ was he was the youngest son, right? So they didn't really care. Everything was supposed to be equal. And that does have, over time, it breaks up the value. And, you know, these are really important pieces now.
The value probably remains to some regard, but it's just dispersed, not...
Yeah, and that's...
not tightly held. And the oldest son, right?
Yeah.
Which is, I think, how it should be. But.
Well, an heir and a spare, right?
Yeah.
But
yeah.
These are things that also, you know, back to the bereavement. In Britain, like the Duke of Winchester, if he has, you know, his 5,000 acres, he owns it. He owns it right to China. He owns the mineral right. He owns all the easements. There's no taxes on it. It can't be seized by the bank. And I would like to see this for some of our older family farms. I'm not saying on all of it, but I'd like to see this come into existence as a recognition that this is the province that we built and we're fundamental to it. I can't really imagine this shift that we're going through. The Saskatchewan Party, when, you know, at the founding convention, we were always about this growth. And the growth now, we're at 1.2 million people and change. But they're not necessarily moving to Eatonia.
No,
the growth is in, you know, 2 or 3 cities.
Yeah, Saskatoon, Regina.
And there's nothing wrong with these places, and I don't have anything against their growth either. But there's lots of cities, and they're kind of all the same. You know, I was just in Stonebridge this morning. I mean, that could be Aurora, Ontario.
Yeah, it could be anywhere.
It could be anywhere. And so the uniqueness of what we have for Saskatchewan is, it's not just the topography, it's not the dryland farming, it is this culture of flatness where there's a large level of respect. And, you know, Peter Zosky used to say Saskatchewan was the most Canadian of all provinces. And, I should tell our renters right now, we're not operating our farm. It's rented by the Gill family. And this is a nice anecdote. The Gills from Leader, they had the two, I don't know, it must be Peyton's great-grandfathers now. So they've been there a long time too, right? But one was the reeve of the municipality, the RM of Happyland, and the other one was the mayor of the town. And there was a tuberculosis outbreak in the 1930s. And do you remember Curtis McManus from Kindersley?
I never knew him, but you've told me about him.
Yeah, and he's a bit of a historian now. He's a teacher at one of the colleges. And the RM of Happyland had a tuberculosis outbreak, and there was no food. Leader was even worse off than Eatonia, right?
Yeah, it's drier and lighter.
Dust Bowl, and they were receiving cod from Newfoundland. And anyways, they just, there's part of Health District Number 1 out of Swift Current, and they just said, everybody can get medical care here, and we'll add it to the municipal taxes, which nobody was paying. But this has been recognized as, it's always, the New Democrats have said, Tommy Douglas invented, health care. Well, no. The Australians and the British, they had it a couple of years before. This was something that was occurring in the Commonwealth, right?
Okay.
Well, no, that's when the greatest Canadian comes up, the New Democrats' phone bank is calling in so he can win that. And I'm not a big fan because I really think that we probably got set backwards 50, 60 years because of that absolute embrace of socialism. And it worked really well for a guy like my grandfather who was told, like Russ Dearborn, right? You're poor because someone else is rich. And it's one of the worst lies that was ever told. And they didn't tell that lie in Alberta. Now Alberta has 5 million people. We have 1.2.
Yeah,
all the bosses there.
It was the social gospel, wasn't it?
Well, some of that,
It started the wheat pools and...
Yeah, and the cooperative movement wasn't anything that we should ever, I think, be in fear of. All 4 of my great-grandfathers were founders of the Saskatchewan Wheat Pool. There was 96 of them. And, one of our mutual friends, Brad Hamner, same thing. This, again, is prairie pragmatism, solving our own problems. I think, the embracing of the co-op is another great one that I had explained to me. You may have a little town that there's not enough to have a single grocer, right? But if you have a single grocer, they're going to gouge you. So the community comes together and has one grocer, and it does gouge you, but you get your money back in the dividend. And, it's kind of fair right across the board. And these were byproducts of what our, ancestors produced for us, was this pragmatism. And I hopefully that we're moving this now into the next generation to solve our own problems at a global level. Like, the technology now exists, and this is what we're commercially working with and on, for us to be able to sell our product anywhere on earth and be guaranteed payment for it. And, these are what blockchains and real-world assets enable.
Yeah, we should talk a bit about that, what your vision for that is and what you're working on. I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, the group of companies I've put together is called GRNX Global. And we're working with Dominion Blockchain Solutions is kind of the holding, is the core of this company, but we're working with really well established, the brokerage company, Johnston's Grain. Very Grain is a sampling company. We started and built an app called Go Grain, which it's been active for a couple years. We haven't been marketing it or for commercialization purposes, but it functions. And these are all going to come together with being able to market your grain through an AI agent on your phone. And the blockchains will do all the tracing. They'll do the underwriting. You can go right to the end user. Your customer is not Richardson's Pioneer. Your customer is the Japanese noodle producer. But we weren't in a position legally, financially, any of these to facilitate these trades. And now the technology's there, and we're putting this into practice. We're partnering with some leading grain buying groups, and the access to capital is here, like moving on chain. I was doing international business in 2011 with the Brandt group of companies. I was their international territory manager, selling grain augers all over the world. Great company, really, really good product, easy stuff to sell. Enjoyed my time there. And I was responsible for the clearances of this. And I was on a flight in 2011 from Heathrow to Johannesburg. And I read this little box about Bitcoin. And I kind of immediately understood it.
Yeah.
And we discussed it with the family in 2012. We started buying it in 2013. Our first buy was at $86. I haven't checked the price this morning, but I think yes, around 160,000 today, 155.
Yeah, 111 US, whatever that works out to. Yeah.
So, I became interested in it. I started reading it. I read Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper. I understood it. And once you have an understanding, and I would say that the education that I had prior to this, really the background in theology let me understand the nature of what blockchains were about. Blockchains are decentralized systems. And they work with complex cryptography, and it all started with Bitcoin. And we were involved with this in the early days in the Bitcoin mining, and we quickly came to understand that the problem was going to be the regulatory space. I was in front of the Parliament of Canada's Senate Committee on Banking and Finance, December 17th, 2014. And it was the first hearing globally in the world, and we were begging for regulation. The regulation is coming now after the second Trump presidency. So where we are in the Bitcoin or in the blockchain cycle is we are at the end of the beginning. And the end of the beginning right now is you've seen Coinbase and the second Trump presidency, the bump that happened after this. You have BlackRock and Blackstone and Vanguard and everybody getting in, and it's not going to go away. And so, I've always, a bunch of the investors that we have with us, we told them, we'll get you some Bitcoin. I think you'll do better with us over the long term. But those guys have done really, really well, right? And we're now, with our group, we have about 150 farmers. We think we're representing about 1.5 million acres, and we're looking to be doing direct export underwriting, starting with the Japanese. And again, it goes back to boarding school. My man in Japan has been setting this up for over a year. We had a trade delegation. He was here in June. We visited grain facilities, farms. We think the Japanese are a really excellent partner to get started with because they have really great rule of law. They pay their bills. We're also their preferred vendor. The Canadian winters kill all the pathogens in the grains. And so we have really, really high food quality pieces. So I think what we're going to see over time is farmers, over the next 5 years, the grain industry is going to move on chain. And we're working with the GrainX Foundation, which will be a token that will enable this. So you can, for the listeners here, you can kind of think of this as a truck that goes back and forth digitally, and it can carry all of the different components. So these are through something called smart contracts. And the AI is now at the point writing our smart contracts for us. And so everything that was having to be done analog or by hand, it's all going to be automated and digitized. And so that means that the farmer is going to be able to have a direct grain contract with the Japanese noodle producer. They're even going to be able to have a relationship with that buying group. And they're going to, be told the type of varieties they want and everything else. And there are so many other nuances that are going to return value to the buyer and value to the seller. You've got perfect actuarial data with blockchains.
Right.
So the insurance industry is going to be completely turned on its head. The FX industry, as we start to use these new mediums, it's really going to be a massive piece going forward. And we're really thankful to our farmer investors thus far, and we hope we can keep working with them and get more as we go forward.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. It's basically you're merging the old economy, I guess, one of the oldest economies.
Yeah.
And with the new technology, the new economy, I would argue. Yeah.
Yeah, and so this is what we have to get our heads around, I think, as producers. We're going to come, you can see it now. You're just driving to Saskatoon through the countryside. There's a lot of big houses now.
Yeah.
There's wealth.
Yeah.
And this happens after 100, 125 years as a province. And as soon as that wealth emerges, somebody's going to try to take it from you. And we really need to be cognizant of that. And it's not so much about making money, it's about preserving that money.
So how does that happen? Like the whole bereavement thing, is there any political will?
I can't say that my 6.5 years were about removing the New Democrats and from power, which we were successful on. But it's really a dysfunctional system. I would say as much as theater of the absurd. And you're getting into really deep inside baseball reasons for this happening. Westministerial democracy had centuries to evolve, and Pierre Trudeau did a lot to destroy it. The jobs of the members of Parliament and the members of the Legislative Assembly should essentially be voting on the expenditures of the government and getting money coming back into their constituencies, or, and that's how it was up until 1971. And Pierre Trudeau made two really subtle changes that have been with us our entire life, and they've made our political system really dysfunctional. The first was that they gave the party leaders the veto on all nomination processes. And that didn't used to be how it ran. How it ran was your elected guys your local guys got together and say, we want Klarenbach or we want Kenny Francis to be our MLA, right?
Yeah.
And then if he doesn't do his job, we'll replace him. That all moved to, no, the boss gets to say, and Pierre Trudeau did this. And the reality of what happens over time, it's a big and complex job.
Well, it's a consolidation of power.
Absolutely. It's the opposite of decentralization. And I would say it's a very, and so after Trudeau did it, it only took a couple of years. It was done in every province. And this is the...
Yeah, if you were running the party, why in the power?
And nobody will even give it up. And so you can see, when I first elected, Michael Chong and I are on the phone every day, and he got passed in Parliament the Reform Act. It keeps getting watered down, right? To say, no, your Parliament doesn't function if you don't have these independent entities. You can't have everybody just voting one way. And then the second thing, I never voted on a line item expenditure in my 2 terms there. It's all omnibus bills. Well, it doesn't really work. I don't care how smart you are. You can't count 20 billion, right? I could count, this is the highways, outside of Aston, or this is the school that's needed in Corroborate. You can understand that. You lump that all together, and you get perpetual deficits. Nobody's really in charge. And probably the worst element is, like, for a lot of the elected officials, this is the best job they're ever going to have. So, I've written about this, and I've told this story. I lost my best friend from political days was Lyle Stewart, who was the ag minister briefly, and others. And in my time there, the longest caucus meeting I ever sat through was about 3.5 hours, was how much we were going to pay ourselves. So, this was completely at odds with, I had a lot of, it really opened my eyes to how things actually function versus how you thought they'd function.
But even on the voting at the party level, you mentioned you vote as a party on often how it works.
Well, now this is absolutely how it works, but this is not how Westministerial...
But can't the parties change that themselves? Like,
they can, but when you've concentrated all of your, as Pierre Trudeau did, right? And a lot of this, it got lost as well in the building of the social welfare state. So the expenditures just go, haywire. You've got healthcare spending, social services. You've got all these things that the government wasn't involved with, and they got out of being involved with the military, which defense used to be a big part. You know, the Canadian Armed Forces now, there's 75,000 of them. It's not viable.
No.
And these are, and this is another thing one of my very close friends is Dr. Christian Leuprecht, who is, you know, Canada's lead national security expert. He's at RMC in Queens. He's a fellow with the Macdonald-Laurier Institute. And we now have this commitment of 5% of GDP in Canada to be spent on defense. We have 75,000 armed forces. And I believe that we're in the Third World War already. I think it's absolutely going to go hot with China within 2 or 3 years here. The Strait of Taiwan, I watch it every day. It is not calming down. My best friend from my Oxford class is German naval intelligence. And, you know, he was in the Donbass while we were studying. This is years before the war breaks out in 2022. And what happened, you know, there was Germans running a plant there. They sent him in to rescue them when the war broke out. Like real James Bond stuff, right? And so you can see these large patterns of history. I do not see the conflict with China not occurring at some point down the road. And so what's going to happen to us in Saskatchewan? What's going to happen to Saskatchewan farmers? Most people don't know their history. It wasn't the war in Europe that brought the Canadian wheat board monopoly in. It was the bombing of Pearl Harbor. When the war went truly global, and they don't call it the global war. World War II is not called World War II until Operation Barbarossa and the Germans, you know, backstabbed Stalin. And now
that's when the name.
That's when they start calling it. Yeah, before that it's the Polish confrontation, or you know, it's got little parts to it. So we've now got this commitment that Canada is a NATO country, as a G7 country, that we're going to give our 5%. What are the 4 things that you need for war? You know, you need soldiers, you need equipment, you need energy, you need food.
Yeah.
And you can get your energy from a lot of places. Our soldiers, I mean, that is what it is. But our industrial complex, we're not building fighter jets. We're not building tanks. Like, we'll be lucky when we build ammunition, which is going to leave that we've got energy
and food.
Yeah. And Poilievre just won his by-election, and the New Democrat and Liberal candidate both said that they're open to a reestablishment of the monopoly of the Canadian wheat board, which never affected Eastern Canada, us.
Just, yeah.
So
us, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and a little
Peace River. Yeah. And so the billions of dollars that were stolen, and that's going to happen again. And I see it happening and ramping up here, because what else are we going to be able to contribute? You know, what is Canada going to be able to contribute to an international war effort? And if we have allies, the Koreans, the Japanese, that can't feed themselves, our government's going to step in out of our pocket.
Yeah, and I didn't touch on that aspect in my catalyst video. I had one of the 7 catalysts I identified was government policy. I didn't touch on that one, but that's certainly, maybe that's the most likely one to impact us, rather than changing ethanol mandates in the States, for example.
Yeah, we have this convergence of artificial intelligence, global disruption, and blockchains. We're about to go into a space of hyperinflation. This is what Satoshi Nakamoto predicted. As you change from one financial system to another, the old one dies at the expense of the new one. So this is why the price of Bitcoin, we bought it at 86 bucks, and it's 155 or whatever now. It will, with fixed supply, it's going to continue to increase. Now, all the derivative, nothing has never ever moved. You know, where's Bitcoin's market cap now? It's well north of $1 trillion, right? The space is a couple $1 trillion. You've got all of these other chains that you can work off of and provide value to. And most people, they never step back to say, what is money? Money's just a technology. You have to be able to count it. You have to be able to store it. You have to be able to divide it. Those are the 3 primary elements. And I don't know if you read Niall Ferguson. The Ascent to Money is one of the greatest books, I think, written in the last 30 years to explain where it's come from, how coinage arose. Global trade doesn't start until they find the silver in Bolivia. The Spanish are taking it over to Spain, and the English are stealing it from them. And that's what started the entire trade with India, was finally after the British stole the Spanish silver, they had something to trade the Indians for that the Indians thought was worthwhile. And then, that goes right on into the Opium Wars, right?
Yeah.
And so now we're at this point where anybody on their handheld can have their own value individualized, and nobody has to know who owns your wallet, et cetera, et cetera. So that built a pretty profound relationship with the individual and the state. And us coming from our libertarian roots, where our local communities are building our own satellite television broadcasting systems, this is at odds with what Toronto wants to see.
Right.
Or what the French want to see. I don't think it's no coincidence. Paris is one of the most centralized bureaucracies in the Western world. And that's just a French thing. Quebec almost separated in the 90s. And since that time, they've been able to centralize things. Bouchard tried this under Mulroney as the Minister of the Environment. Remember, they got rid of acid rain. But they tried this overarching blanket way back then. Oh, everything is affected by the environment. We're going to place this on it. And this isn't coincidental. This is by design. This is where we get carbon taxes and other pieces of nonsense from. So if we do have an increase in global conflict that Canada becomes involved with, I would expect to see it not by a return of the Canadian Wheat Board. We're going to end up having export tariffs. We're going to have carbon tariffs. We're going to have food traceability. We're going to have a whole bunch of elements that wherever the government can put its fingers and derive revenue, they're going to.
Well,
and that's why we need to own it first.
I should say always, I've been thinking for a long time that at some point the governments of the world will nationalize their resources, whether maybe not through ownership, but maybe through the export. And maybe that's what happens with you sell your grain, but the Canadian Wheat Board, the new Canadian Wheat Board, is exporting it to feed South Korea or something.
Yep.
Yeah. And that price will be fixed as the Wheat Board was in World War II. That price stayed in effect for years after World War II ended.
So what is the solutions around that? Well, I think we absolutely have to have digital and data sovereignty. We need, and this is where it is so disappointing, just linking back to the provincial conversations that are being had right now. The New Democrats, let's say that they're friends of Labor. I don't really believe that they are. Why are they not raising, what is AI going to mean for the unions in Saskatchewan? I was with some union folks last night. One's a police officer, and his wife is works for a municipality, and we were talking exactly about this. We need to have good working regulations around this. These are our friends and neighbors. That's why, we don't really understand it. The only unions I've been part of are rugby unions, right? So, but they've done good things. These are our neighbors. I think everybody should have a house and a car, and their kids should play hockey and do figure skating and whatever. So we can't just have haves and have-nots, but we also can't have a very, very small sector of society doing all the productivity and having it all sucked away from us. And, this is the balance, and we've been seeing this scope of the state just increasingly increase, and it just year after year it creeps. There's never been a cut to healthcare, maybe a little bit in the Romano years, but they always talk about cuts to healthcare. No, the aggregate budget never gets smaller. It doesn't.
Right.
And yet there's internal problems that exist there, like trying to book appointments. We do global business. We've got access to everybody's calendar. everywhere in the world.
Yeah, yeah.
And somehow our healthcare system can't link the dermatologist to my GP. Like, come on.
Yeah.
You guys aren't even trying.
Well, and the follow-up, too, after your appointment. Yeah, it's just,
Yeah,
there's a lot of problems there.
There are, but also lots of things to be hopeful for, I would say. So,
How much time do we have?
no idea.
10:48.
Well, what else do you want to talk about? We're still on the clock?
What was it like? Yeah, we're still on the clock. What was it like to be an MLA in the opposition, for the opposition in the MLA in Saskatchewan? What functions can the opposition MLA perform, and what does that look like for them?
Well, I had look, it was an exercise in absurdity. It was the theater of the absurd. I didn't do anything for 6.5 years, 2 terms. I'm there, and you learn very quickly that the control process are the complete opposite of what you thought. So the reality was kind of the staff around 90% of everything, and I didn't like that. That's one issue. I had a case, a woman in Unity had a granddaughter that really fell on hard times, right? You know, street kid, like the worst, right? And we lobbied, and we got her into a treatment center. And then I forget what it was. I think she turned 16 years old, like within a couple months, and they just released her. So you just realize that, so there were things that you could do. The opposition, the ministers, I really don't think very many people know what they're doing if they work in the government. And I'm saying that from the elected side. And from the bureaucratic side, they don't really care, right? Like they want to move along, but the pace at which they're going to move, the risk tolerance, the pragmatism, and one of the most useful exercises that we did in my caucus was we had these caucus retreats. Every year we had a caucus retreat, and we'd go to some provincial resort, and 9 times out of 10 they were just horrific, right? We had rooms full of ants, and you know, April was pretty highfalutin, so you know, nothing worked well on that front for her. But we looked at all of the personalities with Myers-Briggs of our caucus breakdown, and that was one of the most useful exercises that I did in politics, where you could find the process people versus the, you know, the black and white thinkers, and you know, these would break up over liberal and conservative. You could see exactly there were certain people that you were not going to communicate with because you did not approach, and this is within your own team, you did not approach the world the same way. And so, you know, when you work with process people, they're happy that the process got done. The deputy leader of the party was very much this way, right? He was very happy that they were doing something. Like, the outcome didn't matter. You have a lot of those people in government, and that's the opposite for almost every farmer. You can't start seeding in August to harvest in September.
Right.
You have to seed in the spring. Otherwise, like, there's a natural change, and you have to do the work. You have to make hay when the sun shines. And you know, so it was an eye-opening experience, to say the least. I'm confounded by certain elements that I wouldn't have thought were possible. You know, there's a couple people that had, they were radio DJs, or they raised their families in mobile homes, and now they're worth tens of millions of dollars, and just pieces don't necessarily add up around that. You know, like, good Lord, and I can't even imagine what it's at the federal level. But, you know, provincially, and the average person actually knows this. Like, probably the worst thing.
They might suspect it.
Right.
Do you think they actually know it?
Well, their suspicions are there for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I don't think that there's suspicions around anybody from the RM Council. Oh, great, he got a culvert.
Yeah.
Right? But Yeah, this is a problem, and it's also a problem that's converged at a time of media fraction, where we have podcasts like this that people may access for information. We don't have a generic news system anymore. I don't watch television.
No.
We don't really, our newspaper industry is completely kaput, right? So you don't have one medium, and then you know, federally, they're subsidizing groups. So these are also large challenges to democracy as well. So yeah, and then you see some of the outcomes where you have huge problems with huge numbers, and they're just so big, nobody really knows where to start looking at them. Which I think, if you're a bureaucrat, this is part of your goal. Come to work and look out the window. Like, if you're part of something so large that nobody can really manage. And I see this, federally. I don't think there's a lot of elected members particularly want to become the minister of, Indian and Northern Affairs, or in Saskatchewan, if you're a Saskatchewan, you don't particularly want to become the minister of the environment. It's a whole bunch of crap you probably don't believe in, you don't know how to manage, and it's just like, keep me out. So you have large directionless ships for a long period of time. So again, this circles back. I'd really like to see what I think has been so important in Saskatchewan is a libertarian, solve our problems, no problem, but keep it small and keep it local. And when you know where people live, right, that is the greatest, I'm also, I'm not against term limits. And if I'm going to leave, your viewers looking for something, what should happen is you get a pension, you get a good pension as a member of the legislature or a member of parliament. But they used to understand that if you're going to give your best years, you got a really great pension. These the Reform Party and the Canadian Taxpayers Federation had a heyday with this, right? And it was a simple solution to a complex question. So the reality was, oh yeah, we've got public pensions for elected officials back in line. Yeah, and you've also got Safeway clerks, now being cabinet ministers, and they don't know what the hell they're doing, so that, the $1.5 million you would have paid out to somebody that's competent because they had to give up, 30s, 40s in building their farms or building their dental practice or whatever, they're getting compensated for that. That's one of the things that really has been kind of a loss. So what I would like to see happen is, if you're elected once, you get whatever pension you get. If you're elected a second time, you get that old gold-plated pension. I don't know what it was, but it was amazing, right? Like 80% of your wage or whatever for the rest of your life. But if you run for a third term and you're elected, you avoid your pension and you fund it yourself. And that would fix a lot of our problems. So you'd have people coming in with purpose, instead of people that are there to have 25-year careers that don't pass a single piece of legislation.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. It seems to me after 2 terms of a governing body, things really started right. The governments seem to be, in my opinion, seem to corrupt or become aware of their corruptness and their ineffectiveness after the second term.
Well, and this isn't partisan.
No, it's not partisan.
It's the nature of government.
Nature of the government.
You've got a huge organization. There's going to be stuff that stinks in it, right? Yeah. You probably didn't drive it, but it may be something that you inherit. I think this is the case in Alberta. You can see Smith had to deal with a bunch of healthcare stuff. She didn't do that. It's a byproduct, but she's the boss. And, and they'll come out of these things. But I do think, and then I'm not against people having a life in public service, but they can easily afford to fund it themselves then. If they're going to, we need the Ralph Goodills and the Andrew Scheers, and we need these guys that are going to be there for 25, 30 years. No problem with that. But it doesn't mean that, you shouldn't be on the government tit.
Yeah.
And this would drive a lot of the other ones. I had colleagues that were there for 20 years. only one person that I served with is still in the assembly. So, like I'm a legend in my own mind. Nobody remembers who I am or, the inconsequential. I got not a single piece of legislation passed in 6.5 years. I tried to introduce a bill to elect the Senate. The NDP defeated it. And aside from that, I had one meaningful debate with the finance minister, Andrew Thompson, and I had a debate on whether we should use open source or proprietary software throughout the government. And this is back in whatever it was, 2008. That was a useful discussion. I think we didn't get any conclusion to it, and we probably should have gone open source with all things being said and done, but it was something that we could. There is no debate in the House. It doesn't work that way. It is the theater of the absurd. And what's observed on camera is, at one point, I was giving a speech, Trent, and I put the Speaker of the House to sleep. And it was by design, and he was sleeping. There's only 4 or 5 people in there. And I started talking about the NDP's drive for metric time. It's just nonsense. And,
metric time.
Yeah, metric time, instead of having, 60 divided by 6, it should be in 10. There's a full-on nonsense, and the Speaker's sleeping. And so the system, which was built and designed, was so disrupted by these changes that Trudeau Sr. injected that I'm not a dumb guy. I don't understand what committees do. For one of my colleagues, it was about getting the stipend to show up at committee. So you got paid an extra $50 to come to work, right? I don't know what they do. I think there's different federally. And it is the two, they're not the same thing, right? They're different. But the disingenuousness of the first thing from the communication side when they're elected is they say, never say you don't know, right? That you could say, I don't have the answer to that, I'll get back to you, but never say I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, lots of stuff I don't know. It's okay to say you don't know.
Right,
Say,
right.
I don't know the answer to that. So if you're always looking and trying to portray that you have answers, you're going to end up being a liar.
Oh, yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
both sides, and that's really not who we are as a province. And, I've got sitting friends in the New Democratic caucus right now, Sally Hauser, probably the most brilliant woman in that entire building. And it's not just about the partisanship, but the process is really, really executive driven. It's staff driven, and it's caused problems which I think are going to be very, very, very difficult and challenging to to how Canada stays together here in the next 10 years. Peter Zion, you follow him?
Yeah.
Demographer.
Yes. Yeah.
And sometimes our closest friends can watch, and I know that the separatist sentiments in Western Canada are very real. They're very real in our industry. Us being from Kindersley with the oil industry, right? I mean, it's a very, very real thing. And so I've got concerns going forward about, what it's going to do. And it's almost things that we didn't have to worry about 20 years ago.
Is the breakup of Canada even realistic? Is that even possible to happen?
Yeah, sadly. We have an American president who has, postulated the 51st state peace. We have the sympathies for Western separation or Alberta, Saskatchewan dominant, really more in Alberta. But what does Alberta have? It's the oil sands. It has conventional oil. It has natural gas. We have the oil sands. We have conventional oil, natural gas. We have 55% of the world's potash, 55% of the world's high-grade uranium in Saskatchewan. And so a longtime friend of mine said, yeah, it's very, very real because a phone call from Smith and Moe to the White House that says we want to be protectorates, what would the rest of Canada do? Now, I'm not advocating that. I'm not hoping that. I'm just saying that's a situation that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, absolutely couldn't have existed. But now, very, very real as a possibility. And what does it mean for Canada? Like, I don't personally feel all that connected to our, our cousins on the East Coast anymore. They take, and we get the short end of the stick. And that can only happen for so long until it becomes a really, really serious issue. And when you've had your national agendas driven by real estate developers in Toronto, and I have family that are in this, they owned a farm in Whitby. It just got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And there's 7 acres now. We're $70 million, right? Like, it wasn't some rocket science piece. It's just, so this is kind of at odds with what we're battling over. And again, if the federal government is going to infringe on our property positions, and I'm almost certain that they will, it's going to exacerbate this position. And I'm not exactly sure what our provincial governments are saying about this. I know Premier Smith a little, and I'm fairly impressed with her. I don't know our provincial premier. I've never met Mr. Moe. But these are discussions that I would like to have happening, and they're not going to.
So the whole government infringing on the rights of Saskatchewan landowners, is that a partisan? Is that going to be limited to a political party, or is it nonpartisan in your mind? Is it going to be?
I think it's going to come from. I think it's going to come from Ottawa, the CRA. Like, our country's broke. Like, nobody's really on it. And this is another piece of the large blockchain. As you go through this transition, it predicts hyperinflation as you transition from the one medium to the other. And we're seeing this. It's starting now. And we have the very, very complex situation with Trump right now. And there's $3 trillion of, I may be out by $1 trillion, give or take, right? But there's,
what's $1 trillion amongst friends?
Yeah, there's trillions of dollars of U.S. greenback bonds that have to be renewed here.
Yeah.
And if he pushes up the interest rate, he crashes the economy. And if the interest rate's too low, nobody takes it. And so there's an inflationary piece coming. And I'm not an economist, right? I speak with an economist daily, a guy that does econometrics, and we discuss these ideas. But you can see it. Our buying power has shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. Inflation's a really real thing. This is another big thing for Generation X. The betrayal of the promise of, so many of us were flooded with cheap credit. There's a whole bunch of things that were really, really unique to our being at the bottom of the demographic. And now our kids really wondering if they're ever going to be able to buy a house, et cetera, et cetera. And all of this happening where AI is going to be displacing a whole bunch of jobs. There's a lot of problems all coming to fruition at the same time. And I think likely the best solution to these is local governance solving it. And that, for us, would start with the provinces putting their stake in the sand and saying, these are provincial rights, and we have the right to run our own healthcare. We have the right to use whatever technical instrument to monetize our potash that we want to. And I see that with Carney. I've read values. I see that with Carney really focusing on the centralization greatly, that this is going to be a battle. We're already in it, just people don't talk about it. And it's going to be heightened when we have, when the global conflict gets worse and Canada gets drawn in a way that, beyond right now, we sent a bunch of our old stuff over to Ukraine. We're sending them money. That's all fine. But, I mean, people really should be honest. India and Pakistan, 6 wars in Africa, Russia, Ukraine. Who knows what's going to happen with the Baltic states and the Russians? I mean, and then the big one is China and Taiwan and India. 2 nuclear-armed countries, India and Pakistan. And little side note on that, all those bombs, all the uranium, where did it come from? Northern Saskatchewan. Uneasy Lies Ahead. It's an amazing book about
What is it?
Uneasy Lies the Head.
Uneasy Lies the Head.
And it's an amazing book about organizational behavior and Ontario Hydro and the build out of the, 10 or 15 nuclear power plants that existed in, Pickering and Deep River and all of these different places in Ontario. All our uranium is processed in Port Hope, Ontario. And then, the CANDU reactors. And this empire builder, this bureaucrat, built up this massive empire. And then suddenly there's only so much electrical energy that can be used by Ontario, New York, everywhere else. So they started exporting the CANDU reactors to both Pakistan and India, where they promised, oh, we won't put these in a bomb. So, Saskatchewan should have had a program that said, well, yeah, you can use our uranium, but there's jobs and we're going to have monitors sit there and you're not going to upgrade it, right?
Yeah.
And they should have been Saskatchewan people there in Pakistan, in the lab, every day, watching, monitoring it. And when it's all done, it should come back and go into the Canadian Shield where it's not going to hurt anybody. So, that's just an interesting little aside that nobody ever thinks about. And these two countries went to war, and they're going to go to war again. There's no way around this, right? There's Kashmir. It's an enormously complex issue, and the BJP and whoever's running Pakistan right now, they're going to have a war. And what does that mean for us as producers as well, right? India is a massive market for us.
Yeah.
And they don't pay their bills. They're crooked. They're not good trading partners. Blockchains solve a lot of that. It's an amazing part as well, right?
Right, yeah.
So
You can insure payments, yeah.
yeah, and we're seeing this. We've done 2 of these transactions with producers that they get paid as soon as it leaves their truck. It's an instant transfer into their bank account.
That's really neat stuff.
It is, and all the constraints have not been technological. They've been legislative. We've had to find the partners, and our partners from Japan who are promising to underwrite large liquidity positions. The reason we started working with them is their approach to their business in Japan was exactly the same. Work with the regulators, but we don't have the regulators in Canada. We have all the provinces have their own regulatory space, and we don't have a capital markets in Saskatchewan, so you can't make this up. In Newfoundland, the head of their securities commission was also the chief highways inspector. You can't make that up, right? So the SEC, the OSC, they have challenges enough getting real expertise. The smartest people in the world are thinking up new financial instruments and collateral debt obligations and things like these. And, our Financial and Consumer Affairs Authorities hires retired cops, right? I mean, ask them, what's a derivative? I mean, it's a bit of a joke, and it's very, very problematic. And these should be items that are front and center about how farmers are going to be able to preserve their wealth for the next generation. Because our farm really, for us, Trent, it's not about making money. It makes money, that's great. It's about having that legacy for freedom. That's what it is. That's what the farm allows us, is that we're from free people, from Britain, from Canada. And if you have a farm, I look back in the 1930s, there's 35 people lived on our farm that, and they could feed themselves.
Yeah.
They had the water, they had cows, chickens, pigs, grew the crops. Well, the Hutterite colony, they largely do this, right? And so when you have, John Diefenbaker, when you have the freedom to walk away and not be controlled, you're going to have the freedom to make the right decisions for you, your family, and your communities. And that's where I see the biggest risk to the erosion of the Canadian farm, the American farm, the British farm, and this is happening. I don't know if you follow it, but the confiscation of German farms, confiscation of Dutch farms, 1,700 Dutch farmers were expropriated in the last 2 years because the environmental targets by the European Union are not being met for their whatever it is, nitrogen emissions, or God only knows, right? And the same thing. So just this ripple effect. We're very, very fortunate that we have the freedom to operate. Like, I've been to Australia a couple times, and they had to have license plates on their grain augers.
No, really? Yeah.
Yeah, and I said, "Did you guys lose a war or something? Like, what the hell?"
Yeah.
And so us being able to preserve that is probably going to be front and center for what's going to be on my mind, what the commercial capacities to move these things along are going to be, but we need farmers involved, and farmers are going to make the right decisions for themselves and their families.
Quick question. Can you identify a formative event in your life that made you who you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. My family went through a tragedy with my father in 1991 that ended up in, and I'm not going to go into any of the details, but that was a fulcrum for my my dad. I would say this is the most egregious of government overreaches, right? But anyways, he had never had a speeding ticket. Bill was a pretty, Boy Scoutish kind of fella, right?
Yeah.
And so probably that, and I was away at school, and coupled with that year, I had some spiritual stuff that happened to me, which is why I pursued looking at being an Anglican priest. So yeah, absolutely that pivot. And
You'd have been 19.
Yeah, 19 years old.
1920, yeah.
Yeah, in 1991. So that's, the year after that, I worked at a law firm. I worked at Davies, Ward and Beck, first Canadian place downtown Toronto. After that, I never wanted to be a lawyer. That's what we always thought.
Yeah.
I want to be a lawyer. and I've hired half the lawyers in this province. I've got a couple on staff. So that's a real tragedy. Most of them hate their jobs. Not the ones working with me, I hope, but just in general, it was something that, they get to this age and they're doing the same thing. And some of them are working in conflict.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right? And people are lying. And so it's not the most pleasant space in the world. And also, I don't think the financial returns were there from what were promised. So I would say that period in time, and even before that, would have been going away to boarding school, changed my life.
Oh, absolutely.
100%. Because I went from, being a small town kid, and I guess, our family was prosperous, right? Got the indoor pool, that's a big deal. What does your dad do? My dad farms 12 sections. What does your dad do? Well, our family owns the brick, right?
Yeah.
Or, our Angus Caterpillar, or, we get founder shares in Boeing. It was at a whole other level. So, there are no famous farmers.
Right.
Jeremy Clarkson's maybe the exception, right? So I would say going away and getting that exposure, and I actually think that's one of the things that the British figured out just perfectly. Like, teenage kids with their parents are a bad combination, right? They're great if they're with somebody else.
Yeah.
So send them away. Then when they come back, it's absolutely amazing. I never went through any of that angst.
Geez, I never thought about that, really.
Yeah,
never thought about that.
Yeah, so, when they're 12, 13, 14, 15 years old and their hormones are going crazy and they're little idiots. And they're not idiots to other people. No. They're just going to be idiots challenging their parents. So you only see them in the summertime. So, no. That was a very, very clever thing that the British discovered. And So, moving to that school, and I'm the vice president of the Alumni Association. My business is built with, I think we've got 15 old boy investors, the chief strategy officer, the VP of the VP of investor relations, and all of these pieces for a really large and complex business. I wouldn't have had the ability, it takes 20 years to speak investment banker. I don't do it. You don't do it.
No.
I don't know anybody in Saskatchewan that does it because we don't have a capital market. But I went to school with guys that do exactly that, and I just have to know that they know how to do that.
Yeah.
Right? My man in Japan, he traded bonds for Lehman Brothers. But, you're not going to make any inroads into Japan without a Japanese partner representing you because you don't speak the language. It's a xenophobic society. It's a whole bunch of stuff that is really, really unique to the way that they operate. And they're great partners, but they're different, right? Face matters. Did you know you don't compliment an individual on a Japanese business team? It's actually really insulting. You have to always compliment the team. So things that we would never know.
Yeah,
right?
there's culture there.
There's all of these pieces, and I wouldn't have been able to have exposure with that without going to school. And then I got to play rugby there. And we were the best rugby school in Canada. It's probably a rival school of ours now, Shawnigan, for the past 20 years. But, I played rugby for Saskatchewan and University of Toronto and the Ontario Juniors. And that was a huge, big part of our life, just like hockey. I played hockey for 10 years. It's over after Pee Wee. And then, I was president of the Blues. And it's a game that I really came to love. The best in the world are the South African New Zealanders, all farm boys, historically. And, the South Africans are a little more like Canadians in hockey. They'll punch it up. But the New Zealanders, the pragmatism to the breakdown of that game, I probably found that was the single most important experience for business management for me now. Rugby is a game it's made at rugby school in Britain in the 1800s, and it's a game designed to be played by boys. Short, fat ones, big, tall ones, little skinny ones, quick little guys. There's a position, 15 positions. So there's no Wayne Gretzky's in rugby. It's all about the team. You're only as good as your worst player. Okay. So it's really, it's a driving force on the way that you will manage and operate teams because, your compliance officer has a different job than your risk officer, has a different job than your legal officer, has a different job and they all have to work together. And so I would think that those are fairly difficult things to learn coordination from. But if you have that exposure to something physical that, you can start to see the strategies and whatnot. So I hope that answered your question. I would say that's a big pivotal moment.
Interesting, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fun. We are going to do this again if you'll accommodate me. And
absolutely.
I really enjoyed this. So I'm going to include Jason's LinkedIn profile link in the description. I'll also share a link to Dominion Blockchain or GrainX.
Yeah, TRNX Global.
TRNX Global.
That'd be great.
And that's a really interesting concept. And hopefully you enjoyed this. I know I sure did. And on to the next one.
Okay. Thanks, Trent.
Thanks,
congratulations for this and the success with Klarenbach Report. It is one of the side projects. Like I said, every day I'm working with artificial intelligence. And it's my belief that the blockchains are revealing data for trading that we haven't yet seen. I think that the perfect information is actually hidden within the blockchain. And we'll see over the next 5 to 10 years as the computing power picks up for that.
I think you're right.
Yeah, and that, so what you're doing is just like being able to extract these technical trades and how this is all going to interface with farm digital sovereignty going forward is going to be front and center. So again,
all right, well,
thanks.
you.
Okay.
This is fun.
Cheers.